Okay, so we are going to compare and order decimals. And I'll do a few examples. When you compare 4.235 and 4.2359, the first thing that you should do is you should line them up and making sure that their decimal points are in line with one another. So for instance, I have 4.235 and I have 4.2359, okay? And you can see one has more digits than the other. So all I'm going to do is add a digit to the top one, and I'll add a 0, okay? So just do that, add zeros so that they have the same number of digits. But make sure that you have the decimal points lined up. Okay, so next thing, what I want to do is then just go through and I'm going to compare. So for instance, I have 2 4s, so they're both the same, so I go to the next digit. The 10th place is also the same. Then I go to the 100th digit, and the 100th digit is the same. And then I go to the 1000th digit, and the 1000th digit is the same. Finally, when I get to the 10,000th digit, I see that there's a difference, okay? So clearly 9 is larger than 0. So therefore, this number, 4.2359, is greater than 4.2350. Okay, and remember too that if you find a difference in any of the digits before you get to the last one, then you don't have to keep on going. So for example, if I had two different numbers and it was negative 3.267 and negative 3.274, when I compare these, I compare my first digit, it's the same, second digit is the same, third digit is not. So it really doesn't matter what these are at all. I'm just going to look at this digit, the first ones that are not the same, and compare those. So since 7 is greater than 6, then I know that negative 3.274 has a greater absolute value than negative 3.267. However, I have to be careful when I put in my inequality symbol because these are negative numbers. It's not the same as positive numbers. So the one with the greater absolute value is actually the least number. So negative 3.274 is less than negative 3.267. So be careful of that when you're dealing with negative numbers. Remember that a greater absolute value on a negative number means that it is less than the other number. Okay, the next section on today's worksheet is going to ask you to compare numbers that might not be in the same form. So for instance, they might give you a fraction and then they might give you a decimal and ask you to compare the two. And the only good way to compare a fraction to a decimal to see which one is greater or less than the other is to convert the fraction into a decimal. But either way, you're going to have to put them into like form. So some of you might know that what 3/4 is as a decimal. And if you do, that's great. So one possibility is that you could rewrite 6 3/4 as 6.75 and then compare it to 6.47. If you didn't know that 3/4 was 6.75, then what you should do is go ahead and divide 3 by 4. Remember to convert a fraction into a decimal. It's always the top number divided by the bottom number. So clearly 4 doesn't go into 3, so we're going to have to put a decimal point and add a 0. So 4 goes into 30 7 times. 4 times 7 is 28. And 4 goes into 25 times. So that's where the 0.75 comes from. It comes from dividing 3 by 4. So once again, put them both in the same form. Make them both decimals, or if you know the fractions, make them both fractions. But that's the only way that you can really compare to see which is larger. And if it's a mixed number, like this one was 6 3/4, you don't do anything with that 6. Just divide the 3 by the 4 to find out what is to the right of the decimal. You don't really need to do anything with that 6 at all. So the third section on the worksheet is just ordering a larger set of numbers from least to greatest, but you're going to follow, example 1, and you're just going to line them all up so that they're decimal one on top of the other and line up their decimal places. Fill in any blanks with zeros and then go through and compare digit by digit. And on the back of the worksheet, there will be more ordering. This time, though, they say greatest to least. So just be careful if they're asking you to order least to greatest or greatest to least. And that's pretty much it for today's worksheet.